What's up guys, BT Moto back here with another review, and this time we're on a 2021 Ducati 950 Hypermotard. Now this bike is kind of like a, I guess you'd say an amalgam of a dirt bike and a touring bike put together. It's a pretty decent setup. I mean, I've been riding this thing for probably 50 miles now. Not noticing anything crazy. This platform does have about 112 horsepower and 71 pound-feet of torque, which make it, I mean, it's over 430 pounds wet, which means fully fueled with all the fluids and everything. It makes it a little heavier than our S1000RR, for example, but it's a pretty good example of what you can do with power to weight and how power to weight can actually be comfortable on a bike. This isn't a screamer as far as power goes. There's not a huge amount of power on tap here. I do have some good amount of torque because this bike is delivering over 80% of its torque at 3,000 RPMs, and of course it's a Ducati, so we can expect big torque numbers from this twin. It has a 2-cylinder motor in it. And this model, the 2021, they've actually put a revised ECU in it for better throttle control. Has a revised engine. Even the engine case is made of magnesium to reduce a little bit of weight from its predecessor, along with the fact that they also put in a new tubular frame that they shaved, I believe, like 0.8 millimeters out of it to make it a thinner frame, to make it a lighter bike as well. So total net, we're about 10 pounds lighter than its predecessor. And I haven't ridden the previous model, but everyone's saying this bike is more flickable. When you take weight off a bike, especially when it's such low power as this bike, it's going to be more flickable, of course. That makes a whole lot of sense, and it shows. And apparently the seating pushes you a little more forward, and when it does that, it inspires a little more cornering power. And this bike likes to flex its muscles around tighter circuits, so tighter canyon riding, tighter, something like Chuckwalla here in Southern California. It's a very technical and tight track, not really for top speed, but really for low speed stuff. I think this bike would shine pretty well. As far as comfort and riding goes, like I said, we're riding this for about 50 miles or so far, and it feels okay. Nothing insanely comfortable. I'm not really liking the seating. I'm not really liking the ergonomics so much of the bike. When you're on the freeway, for example, I'm going 80 miles an hour and I've got to pull on the bars because I'm this giant wind sail, because there's no aero on this bike. So I wouldn't use this thing, or would say it's necessarily for long trips to and from work or something like that. I'd say this is more of an urban thing, canyon carver. In typical Ducati fashion, this bike does have some pretty cool stuff on it. We're including this 4.3-inch TFT here that's new for this model, and it mimics the V4. So it's like the V4 screen, but a little smaller. It's like a mini one. It has some pretty cool settings though, although the one that's kind of upset about the one setting is the ABS that you cannot disable the rear on, which means no more cool stoppies for this bike. Let me see if I can try and pull one here. Oh, it came up a little bit. Let me see. I got really like... Oh yeah, no, never mind. No stoppy. The back end came right up on the bike. As far as power goes, outright, I barely pulled a tire up right there, and that's loading the suspension. So it definitely has enough power for something that's kind of in this market. It's not supposed to be some massive powerhouse. And unlike most Ducatis here, getting going is extremely easy, though I will say the bike, like most Ducatis, is pretty useless below 3,000 RPM. You want to keep this bike above 3,000 RPM. This bike has a very linear power band, and what I mean when I say that is usually like a twin for Ducati, the issue you're going to run into is the fact that $11.99 or $12.99 you would step on the gas, or sorry, you pull the throttle, twist the throttle, not pull the throttle, twist it, and it would give you all kinds of power at like 7,000 or 8,000 RPM, but it was kind of gutless before that. This is a very linear power band all the way from when you hit the gas, and I think that kind of exemplifies when Ducati makes that claim that 80% of its torque is delivered after 3,000 RPM. Another thing I noticed is this quick shifter is a little hit and miss on this bike, meaning when I'm getting going, it's either a nice smooth crisp shift or it has a lot of buck in it. And I've been really careful with my foot, because a lot of Ducatis, if you're not precise with your foot, it will start bucking everywhere if it feels like your foot's on the lever or something like that. So I've been careful about that. And it just feels like, see, that felt nice right there, but sometimes it does this whole weird bucking thing. Let me see if I can mimic it real quick. No, it's doing it fine again. Maybe it's when it gets higher in the RPMs. I'll do a little more research on it. I've been riding for 50 miles, but yeah, the quick shifter is a little bit hit and miss. It's jerky sometimes. Also, this bike, I saw it at a stoplight get to like 200 something degrees. That's a little hot. Not to say that that's bad for the bike or anything like that, but we'll see if we can get those cooling fans on a little bit earlier with the tuning, because a cooler engine means cooler oil. Cooler oil means your oil lives longer, and if your oil lives longer between changes, that means your motor lives longer. So we like to kind of do an all-encompassing tune here, which segues me into why we're here in the first place. We like to do these tunes with full research, meaning we research the bike, the ECU, how to tune the bike, number one. So can we tune it? Awesome. If we can tune it, we try to get the bike in our hands. Once we get the bike in our hands, we'll dyno test it and make sure that we can actually tune the bike properly, make sure we can make changes, we have a good grasp on the ECU and how it works. Then we like to do these ride tests. So I'll ride it 100 miles stock, make notes of what I like and what I don't like on this bike, and I'll send that off to the calibrator, and we'll work together to formulate a tune based on the demographic of the motorcycle. When I say based on the demographic, that means the people that buy this motorcycle aren't impressed with sheer power. That's not why you buy this motorcycle. Whereas if it's an M1000R from BMW or a V4R from Ducati, people are liking powers, so that's going to be a big primary concern for us. Now on this bike, we want rideability, because this is what this bike is lacking. Even when I'm taking off from these stops right now and I'm very low throttle, the throttle kind of sways and it's kind of on and off like a switch. And this is bone stock. There's nothing I've done to this bike whatsoever. So we'll test this 100 miles, we'll go to the dyno, and then we'll test the actual performance on the dyno, and then we'll go do some 60 through 130. Usually I don't think this thing will do 60 through 130, though I will try, but I think it's going to be a 20 through 100 in this bike, just because of the way it's geared and how much power it has. It'll be a lot easier, so I'm not just using this thing for 4 miles trying to get to 130. And based on that testing from the dyno, the 60 through 130, and just overall rideability before and after, we should see a quantifiable difference between how this bike feels stock and how it feels flashed. And we want to make sure that people, when they're spending money on our products, that they feel it's worth it. They're getting a good value for their money. Not that it's just making some peak number on a dyno, but the overall experience of the motorcycle has changed. That's what we want to see. Alright, so that was the low end testing. Now we're going to go do some top end testing up at my spot here. Alright, so this is the top end stuff here. We're just going to test out how this bike feels in the canyon setting. Not going to go too hard on her, but we need to get a good idea what she can do. So far the bike feels really balanced. I'm feeling that forward seating position does affect the geometry of the bike. I actually had to put a couple more pounds in the tire in the front to make it feel balanced, because she wasn't feeling too balanced before. Tip in turns pretty good. The torque is pretty awesome coming out. I mean, you almost can't mess up the gear. Let's do low speed tip in. Not bad for a Ducati. Not bad. Not bad at all. Pretty good for stock, honestly. Doesn't have the shortcomings a lot of bikes do these days, as far as restrictions go. The turning does feel really balanced. It does feel like a very technical bike. And she's making some pretty good steam through here, especially for a bike that has barely over 100 horsepower. Oh, a bug just hit my knee, it hurt. Pretty awesome power here. And even if I do get a little bit sideways with the back tire, there's slide control on this bike. It'll allow for 10 degrees of slide control before the ABS kicks in and starts giving you a helping hand. It's still pretty controlled. The brakes, the initial bite is very soft. The brakes are good, but the initial spite is just too spongy for me. So I'd probably recommend, that was pretty fun actually. Kurt recommends some fluid and some pads. Get rid of these stock stuff. So that was a lot of fun. Oh yeah. Now let's go ahead and see what this thing did on the 60 through 130 or 20 through 100. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do, but I'm pretty sure I'll state in the video. All right, stock 20 through 100 on the 950. Let's do it. Let's get that second gear hit. Feel that mid-range pull. And here we go. Well, I mean, here we go. You guys saw it, that was a 6.6 20 through 100. I tried to do a 60 through 130 and it took literally 29 seconds. That last from like 120 to 130 on GPS it's almost like this bike has the arrow of a garage door at that point. It's just hitting a massive wall. So we'll just do the 20 through 100. Although it can get to the 130, it just takes 30 seconds to do it. Overall, the impression of this bike, very good for stock. I mean, it doesn't have this crazy limited stuff that a lot of these newer bikes have. We're missing 60 horsepower in the mid-range. The bike feels very planted. I've also forgot to mention, but the seat is a little tall. Meant more for taller people. I can still flat foot this bike. I'm 6'3". I'm a little taller than most people, but I can see some people having an issue. But the same thing with dirt bikes, you know. I mean, the seats are very high. They're like that for a reason. So if you like dirt bikes, you probably like sitting in a position like this. And after riding for quite a while now, I'm safe to say probably about an hour of riding on this bike is about all you can do, and your butt starts hurting. The seat's not the most comfortable, to be honest. Let's kind of go step by step on what I've noticed about this bike and what we're going to change here. The cooling fan's coming a little too late. We're going to try to lower that a little bit. The throttle on, off. It's a Ducati. It's going to be jerky. We'll see if we can smooth that out a little bit after exacting a little bit of the fuel mixture here. The power is not exactly linear. It's pretty good. I want it to be a little more smoother across the entire curve. The initial start of the bike, meaning from a dead stop and clutching to first, there's a slight weird revving thing going on for a very minor throttle inputs. If you give it more than 5% throttle input, it's perfectly fine, but we're talking for very minor throttle inputs. I'm noticing a little bit of jerkiness and kind of uneven idle. Also, the bike idles a little bit too low for me at like 1300. We'll see if we can raise up about 15 or 1400 RPM, because right now it feels like it's gonna almost stumble sometimes when I'm at a stop. Like it almost kind of stutters, like and it keeps going again. So I think a little bump in RPM will fix that. There are some torque limiters on the bike we can remove, like we do with the bigger brother, the Panigale. And if we do that, we should get a little more oomph in the mid-range, less throttle pull for that, allow you to have a little more power on demand without a full twist. And keep in mind, any of the changes we make to this motorcycle, all the modes will still be 100% functional. They'll just include our tuning now. So that means we refine the mixture or refine a few things. It'll feel nice and smooth, but you also still have the usability of the modes. Anything on this bike that has a function, it'll still work. We're not taking away functionality from the bike. That's a big no-no for us. We like to add functionality, add rideability. We don't want to take away any of that from the bike. So I think now that we got that covered, we're gonna head over to the dyno and see what this bike puts down stock and tuned before and after. All right, I'm back here at Lee Cycle, our dealer in San Diego, with the 950 strapped down, ready to go. Let's make some numbers. Let's see what she does stock. Let's see what she does flashed.
All right, we're all wrapped up in the dyno with the 950. Let's see some of those numbers. We've got stock versus mod, and of course we've got the mod file in blue there that carries the RPM, and stock is in red. Now, you can see peak to peak here, we're getting 3-wheel horsepower of that stock baseline of 105 to 108, and we're getting a couple wheel torque. Now, while those numbers aren't very impressive, what is impressive is something on the low end, like 3,000 RPM where you're getting going here. We've got a total of, I mean, that's 7-wheel horsepower right there and 5-wheel torque. Now, also that may not seem like a lot for those car guys, but for bike guys, that's huge, especially where you're getting going. It's be a lot smoother. It's gonna be a lot better than that stock baseline. And over up top here, we're looking at 3-wheel horsepower and 1-wheel torque right here. But then what we're getting a whole lot of stuff here is that 10.2 RPM limiter that we've raised up to about 10.8. And you can see we've widened the power band right there and kept that power going. You can see the stock baseline falling off right there where our mod file goes over. That means less shifting at the track. That means a wider power band. Not only did we just fix the power, we've got this nice smooth power band now. We've also fixed other rideability aspects of the bike. We've got a cooler fan temp on this thing where the fans come on earlier now to keep the bike overall cooler. Even riding the bike is going to be cooler. We'll test that back to back against stock, of course. Torque calculation and fueling. This is by far the best option on the market right now because we've seen the other options, and I'll show you the other options. Other solutions out here don't do the torque calculations and fueling correctly. That means the bike's going to buck quite a bit. It may stall here and there. Throw a code for a torque miscalculation. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into this bike that people don't realize. They just throw some fuel at it and maybe de-restrict it and try to put the torque values up. Then you get some weird behaving bike that kind of bucks down low. So we think we fixed a whole lot of stuff in the rideability, and of course going over that on the post ride so we can see exactly one-to-one exactly what this bike is doing. Now let me show you guys another solution on the market here. I've changed the graph up. Blue is still ours and red is going to be a leading competitor, let's put it that way, that a lot of people put their faith in for these bikes, and this is what I'm talking about down low. We have these issues here where it's losing all kind of power, gaining power. It looks like a little roller coaster here where we're losing so much power, and this is a very reputable aftermarket tuning company. I'm not going to name names, I'm not going to sling mud, but let's just put it this way, a lot of people use it, and that's a lot of power we're missing, a lot of torque we're missing, and up top it has the same exact RPM limiter as stock, whereas ours pulls past it to give you a wider power band. Again, the wider power band is an option, guys. If you don't want that, we can leave it stock as well. But this is good for those track guys and people wanting to squeeze every little bit out of that bike. Let's get this BT out on the road and let's test each feature one by one. I'll explain to you guys how it feels versus stock with quantifiable data.
All right, everyone, we are back. And man, I can definitely feel a difference in riding this bike. I know on the dyno, we only saw a couple horsepower more. We saw a lot more on the bottom end where we've fixed all the fueling. And we gained a little more from the top end there with the extended power band and a couple more horsepower. But when you're talking a couple horsepower and you're only making a little over 100, it's kind of a big deal. You can definitely feel it. You also notice the idle here, we're at 1400 on the idle now. So it bumped it up a little bit so it doesn't just try to struggle. Taking off is a lot better. Has more oomph. It's definitely picking up faster for sure. I'm guessing the 2300 is definitely going to be faster on this bike. And it's smoother across the entire range while also not giving you a crazy on-off throttle transition. So you've kind of smoothed everything out. And it all comes together when you ride it. I know on the dyno you're not really seeing a whole lot. But when you actually ride the bike and you throw your leg over it, you can definitely feel the differences between tuned and not tuned. We also did a couple little small things like, you know, when you key the bike on, there's no real, it has the Ducati logo and you go straight to the startup. Now you see racing logo when you start the bike up, so you know the bike's tuned. It gives you more of that racing feel because I know the Ducati mapping says Race Evo or Racing Evo. This one will just say racing on the combi now. The shifter has also gotten smoother and faster. No longer has that weird bucking I saw every once in a while. It's just nice and precise. You know what to expect. The modes still retain their functions. And like I said, I'm not getting crazy jerky on-off throttle transitions. I can ease into it very nicely, and the power comes on as I'd expect. There's no jerking to it. Along with being able to flash the bike on the handheld, we've also added the functionality of the service reminders. You can reset those from the handheld and And you can do that for almost all Ducatis, I believe, at this point, but especially this one. I've tested it out. You can see it right there working. And you can reset adapts on the bike as well. There's a couple adaptations you can reset. And you can also clear and check your engine code. So these all come with the handheld. This isn't something we charge extra for. This all comes with it. Kind of make it more feature rich to add value. You can see right there we're idling at 1400 flat static. There's no crazy up and down on the idle. Anyone that's doing any kind of modifications to these bikes as far as airflow changes, when I say airflow, it's not just air in, but that is also air going out of the bike. You should really do, or really should consider some tuning. And you saw when we looked at the mapping that we had, I'm not going to name the name of the tuner, but it's a very well-known tuner. That map did not ride well. I rode it for a couple miles. It felt jerky. It actually felt better to just go back to stock tuning rather than what they had in the can tune for this bike. That's why it's so important to have the bike in your hands and test this in real life. And we do 100 miles stock and 100 miles flashed. It's so much smoother now. It's noticeably smoother from throttle transitions on and off. It's no longer as jerky. This is so much nicer. I'm also noticing how manageable this bike is at low RPM now after the flash. Like I could be here at 2000 RPM, picks right up. It's very manageable. There's no drama. There's no bucking me off the bike. Just nice and controllable. Like the stock, I had to keep it at higher RPM, which meant it was more of an on and off switch type of power. And then I can lay the power on. We've also reduced that fan temp down to the 190s now, so we don't want to see this bike get over 200 degrees. As typically we do for most bikes. It just depends on where the bike kind of cruises at, so I have to log how the bike cruises, where the bike sits in traffic, if I'm stop and go where it's at, because we don't want the fan on constantly. We want a happy medium where we're pulling the engine temperature down, but we're not having the fans on constantly. So it's a nice little kind of balancing act we do. Now, I don't know if any of you owners notice this, or maybe it's this bike in particular, but there's a weird false neutral when I shift from 6 to 5. So I'm using the auto blipper, and I go from 6 to 5 like this. It would get stuck in neutral. I mean, it would say 5 on the screen, but it would free rev. So it would be kind of weirdly in some limbo there where it's not actually in gear. I'm noticing it's not doing that anymore. And I don't know if that, like I said, I don't know if that's a product line issue or if that's a singular bike issue. But if you guys have that issue, it clears up with the tuning. I definitely think this is how the bike should have came. A lot more refined like this, especially, I mean, if this bike costs like 10,000 bucks, like, all right, it's unrefined, it's a little rough around the edges, got it, but I mean, this bike ranges from like high 13s to almost $20,000. Come on, give us a little bit more. Oh, there we go. See, look at this false neutral right there. It's, you know, it's in gear, but it's not in gear. So I guess it didn't fix it, guys, but just to show you guys, that's exactly what it does. I'm not putting a whole lot of effort into downshifting, but I'm putting the same effort I usually do into most bikes, and it goes in this weird limbo. So if you have this issue, I guess just be a little more deliberate in your downshift from 6 to 5. I'm gonna see if we can make this journey a little faster up to the top end stuff. All right, at the top end stuff here now. Gonna test her out, see how this tune file works. Definitely feels more linear. Power is easier to access due to the tip in. The extended RPM range definitely helps the power. Keeps the power band heavy. Tip in's very nice. A lot more than a Ducati, or a lot better than normal Ducati is. Power comes on up top. Low speed tip in. I'm expecting this to be very good. And it is. Absolutely zero issues. Very good. Again, those brakes a little bit spongy. The torque, still very good. Around the turn. Yeah, she's tailing. feel like I normally get from Ducati. Just very manageable. Torque's very good, as expected, just like before. We're getting a little more of it now. Yeah, I'd say this is good for very tight technical tracks. I wouldn't say it's good for something that where you really need to get a lot of speed on, but very good for line selection, technical stuff. Initial bite of those brakes though do need help. So definitely some improvement there. Let's see if we got improvement from that 20 through 100. All right, we're here doing the 20 through 100 testing on the 950 post flash. Let's get it. Here we go. You guys saw it, that was a 6.2 20 to 100 versus that 6.6 we did stock. So that is 0.4 of a second faster in 20 through 100. And for a bike that we only made 3-wheel horsepower on up the top end, that's pretty good. Now let's kind of go over everything here before I gotta get some gas. A reminder on the gas here, by the way, I haven't noticed any reduced gas mileage. Now, of course, if you're testing the tuning out, you're having fun with it, you have a heavy hand, please remember that your gas mileage is going to go down. You can't be cruising your bike stock and then try our tuning and just have a heavy hand on it and expect it to get the same exact gas mileage. It's going to get less. So I'm noticing if I ride it same 1-to-1, I'm getting the same gas mileage as I did stock. So let's kind of go over the benefits of the flash here. Other than the fixed fueling, ignition changes, the limiter issues that we pulled off the bike, everything about this bike is good. And that smoother throttle now that we have, lower fan, better quick shifter. There's a litany of things we have, and not only that, but the handheld itself can also do service reset, those service reminder resets and add-up resets, along with clearing engine codes and checking engine codes. And you can switch files to the handheld as well in case you wanted to do different gases, different tunes for different other things. So there's a multitude of things you can do with the handheld. That's why it's good to have. The bike overall is riding better and smoother. I can attribute that directly to the tuning versus the stock tuning. It's everything you want it to be from the factory without it killing you. And if you want to dull the throttle even more, you do that by going, let's say, we go into here, we go down to touring, and on touring I have set the engine a little bit low with a smoother throttle response. So let's try that. I'll close the throttle. It's transitioning to touring now. And there she is. And yep, we got a lot less power, but the throttle is even smoother than before. I have a lot more forgiveness in this throttle, let's put it that way, before it starts getting away from me. Let's put it back into sport. So sport here, boom, close the throttle again. There we are, the transition, and there it is. Yep, I got the power all back now. You can hear it. And the transitions, it's still pretty smooth, but it's not as smooth as that reduced power map. So luckily you have custom options in the combi here to customize your experience. So we have a lot of people, especially with the BMW stuff, because it's so customizable, that will say, hey man, you guys did X, Y, and Z to my bike, I don't like it. And they would tell them to check their modes, because after they flash their bike on a BMW, it defaults to a road mode on the 23 Plus S1000RR, for example. And that dulls everything about the bike. So they think that we did something bad with their bike, when in reality they weren't checking the screen. They weren't doing anything that they should be doing as far as customizing their settings in the first place. But this bike luckily does not change settings. It doesn't change modes when you flash it. Everything stays exactly as it was pre and post flash. So I think that's going to do it for the 950 today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.